Welcome to the Gastro Girl Podcast. We bring together patients, experts, and health advocates who are all here to help you optimize your health. Here's your host, Jacqueline Gollin.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gastro Girl Podcast. I'm your host, Jacqueline Gollin. Today you'll hear directly from Samantha, who is a patient sharing her personal journey with eosinophilic esophagitis, otherwise known as EoE. Now, like many patients, her symptoms developed slowly. For years, she believed that what she was experiencing was normal, and she was told everything was all in her head. In this episode, we'll talk about what that felt like, how she finally received a diagnosis, and what she wants others to know about her journey and how it could possibly help them. Thank you to Takeda for support of this episode. Welcome to the show, Samantha. We're so happy to have you on today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And this is such an important topic. We get so much email and so many comments on our previous videos that we've done, our podcast episodes about EoE, eosinophilic esophagitis. And one of the ones that resonate the most are patient stories like yours. So we're so excited to have you on today. So Samantha, when did you first notice something wasn't right with your swallowing, with your throat?
Yeah, so it goes back a while for me. I started choking as a child, and I am 32 for reference, so it's been going on for quite a while. And I choked on just random food, small pieces. I choked on ice cubes. I've choked on all kinds of things. And as a kid, I had the Heimlich maneuver done on me more times than I can count.
Wow.
So it kind of started there, but at that point in time, EoE wasn't common. Nobody really knew about it. And so my mom raised me as a single mom, and she didn't know what to do. So it was never really brought up to my doctors. It was just, oh, she needs to take her time swallowing. It's all in her head, just stuff like that. So it never really came to light as a child.
So describe some of your symptoms that you remember. And did you do anything to cope with them?
So my first memory of choking, I was at my dad's house and I was drinking a glass of water with no lid on it, and an ice cube went down and got stuck in my throat to the point where I couldn't breathe. So obviously, ice cubes melt eventually, but it was still terrifying as a kid. I believe I was around 7 or 8 years old, and my dad gave me the Heimlich maneuver. And it came out, but it was terrifying. So, and pretty much from that point forward, it was frequently that I was choking on food, or my mom tried to give me an allergy pill because I did have allergies as a young kid. And I also had asthma. So I choked on teeny tiny pills, and it just became a thing from a young kid that, okay, she's just got to do liquid, because no matter how hard I tried, I always choked.
So, did you think this was normal? Or did your mom think it was just something you had to just deal with?
Yeah. No, I didn't think it was normal, but I was so young that I didn't know. I didn't know any better. And I just listened to everybody else around me and everybody that would talk about it to my mom, or my mom would ask questions to, at the time she was dating a guy that was an EMT. And so his interpretation was that it was just all in my head, and that I just needed to get over it. I needed to, just give her some M&Ms and teach her to swallow M&Ms, and then work up to bigger pieces and she'll be fine. So, and that was kind of where it was. So I grew up believing that it was in my head, and that there was nothing physically wrong with me, and then it was all mentally.
Oh my God, that's just so heartbreaking to hear for a young child.
Yeah. So it kind of made me feel crazy, and like I just couldn't eat like a normal person, and I didn't know why. But as a kid, I didn't really know to question anything different.
So going back to, eating as a child, how did your eating habits change over time? Like until you got to diagnosis, and we'll talk about that later, but what were you cutting your pieces up into small bites, or how were you coping with this?
Definitely. I was definitely learned to cope on my own, and now it's become a part of who I am. And it's just something that will never change, is I chew and chew and chew and chew until it's liquid. And I've done that since I was a kid. So it's like, it's pretty much how I learned how to walk. I learned how to chew by liquefying my food. So I was always the last person at the dinner table. I still am today. And people used to give me a hard time for it. And I had stepbrothers at my dad's house, and so they ate like teenage boys. They inhaled their food, and then here I was sitting at the dinner table an hour later after everybody had finished. My food's gone cold, and at that point, a lot of time I just get so tired of chewing that I'm not even full. I'm just so exhausted from chewing that I just
Oh.
done. And then I feel bad because I'm still eating and everybody else is done. So that was just growing up and always the last person at the dinner table.
No, wow. And I wonder, as we talk about this, when people are listening, how many other people have someone in their family or a friend that is just like you right now, sitting at the dinner table and they're poking fun at them and thinking that it's just they're just doing something to be slow and as opposed to something really being potentially wrong with what's going on. With that said, did you avoid certain foods?
As a kid, I do remember avoiding steak, and just because of the gristle, and it was so hard to chew, and I'd either just have to spit out a ton of pieces, which was gross, or have the risk of choking. So because steak is kind of hard to chew till point of liquefying it. So I do remember specifically just avoiding steak.
Now, did you have any other symptoms? Did you have any reflux or heartburn or anything like that going on? Do you
Not
remember?
as a kid, no. The only symptom that I had was I just choked on everything. I choked on pills and food, and I could never like gulp liquid or water, when people kind of just like chug something. I've never been able to do that.
Oh, wow. So, Samantha, what was the turning point when you finally got to a doctor? Did you go to a doctor all along and they said nothing was wrong with you, or what? Tell us
No.
about that part.
So how it all kind of came to light is it was 2019. I was a mom of two, and I had been dealing with this since a kid. And so I was on my way to work as a fitness instructor, and I took this little pill. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, wow.
That little pill, allergy pill, daily pill that I take every day. I bite it in half, and I choked on it. I was in the car by myself driving to work, and thankfully I was pulling into the parking lot of work, and I sat there. And normally I mean a lot of time when I choke, I'm so used to it at this point that I've always been able to do my own thing, of whether it's bending myself over the back of a chair or pounding, like against a chair to kind of pound myself on the back, or drink as big of gulps of water as I can. But this time I could not get it down. And at one point when I knew, because I used to be a paramedic before this. I had gotten my paramedic license before this happened, and I used to teach CPR instructions and that kind of thing. So I have the background. And at that point I realized that I was in trouble. So I texted my husband and I told him that I'm driving myself to the emergency room, which was thankfully not too far away from my work. So I knew that I could make it, and told him that I was choking on a pill and I needed him to meet me there. So I went to the ER there, and they tried a few different options. A like kind of the idea of where you like swallow a Mento pill, but like crushed up like Mento, and then made me drink Sprite to essentially fizz it out, and that was excruciating. And I got to the point in the ER where the methods that they were trying, I was no longer able to swallow my saliva. So at that point, they knew that it had become emergent because I could hardly breathe at that point. I think because it had gotten so inflamed with the pill being stuck. And so they made the decision to go in for an emergency
Endoscopy?
endoscopy. Thank you. An emergency endoscopy. And when they put me under for that, they did their normal thing with the scope, and I guess they started with the adult scope because I was an adult and they couldn't get it down. So they had to switch methods and go to the toddler scope. They could also not get that down. So they went to the infant scope, and they finally were able to make it through my esophagus with the infant scope, break up the pill and pull it out. And then when I woke up, they told me that my esophagus was the size of a coffee straw, and they don't know how I'm alive.
So this is years. And you were how old in 2019?
Let's see.
You were like in your late 20s.
Yeah, late 20s.
So you went your whole life and not one doctor thought to look at your esophagus.
Nope.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah, I was already a mom of two and a working mom, and my husband was going through med school at the time. So we'd lived a lot of life up until that point. So when I woke up and they told me that, and then they explained to me that the gastroenterologist there said, I think you have something called EOE. And I had never heard of it. And my husband was in med school and he never heard of it. So, and they proceeded to explain to me that EOE is, not curable and kind of what it was, and that I needed to get in with a gastroenterologist locally immediately. So, I did that, but after that scope, because they had to tear my esophagus to get that pill out. So I went home coughing up blood and I couldn't eat for about a week after that whole incident. It was very, very painful. And I felt like I was having a heart attack because it was just so much chest pain, sharp, sharp chest pain. But I got in with the GI doctor there and he said that he wanted to do what's called a dilation. So that sounded terrifying. But we went in and did the dilation, and he said it was rough. The first dilation, he told me that he got about halfway through and thought about quitting because he was so afraid that he was going to rupture my esophagus because of how much scar tissue I had. So he told me that he had never seen a case as advanced as mine, and nobody could tell me how I was still alive because of how small it was. And like, I don't know how you're eating. So that was pretty scary, and pretty scary to have a doctor tell you, like, I was afraid to deal with it and touch it. And I don't know. He said, I'm going to be honest, I don't really know where to go from here. And I don't know if I am going to be able to help you.
Oh my goodness. That's so scary. So this is an extreme example for someone so young. And so what happens over time for those of us who are listening, and we've done episodes with experts that talk about this, but what happens over time if EOE isn't diagnosed is there's something that calls fibrosis, which is what that scarring is. And the esophagus continues to close. So with Samantha, what you were having is like your esophagus was so small that you weren't able to even get that small, tiny pill down.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something that we've seen pictures of people being in their 70s that haven't been diagnosed, and they show like the Tylenol not being able to go down. But for you being so young, I mean, that's mind blowing, and for me, and maybe it's more common than we realize. So what happens next? You went the dilation, so they opened up your esophagus as much as they could without, causing any damage. And when did they finally do the biopsy? Did they do a biopsy and tell you definitively, like, this is eosinophilic esophagitis?
So they did do a biopsy. They took a biopsy of every portion of my esophagus because he said from the top clear to the bottom, the opening of my stomach was completely strictured. I had rings, I had scar tissue, and he said it was so inflamed he's never seen it before. So he took biopsies and they came back negative, which blew everyone's mind. And he said that he thought the reasoning behind it is because the scar tissue is so deep and so thick that he couldn't get deep enough to the true eosinophilic cells to get a positive biopsy. And he told me, he said, I'm not going to lie, I'm not comfortable going that deep. You're going to need to see eventually a specialist who can do this safely.
Okay, now I'm like on the edge of my seat. What happens next? Like, I want to know when you finally got that diagnosis.
What happens next is a little crazy. And thinking back on it now, I don't know how I survived it, honestly, because it was brutal. Like I said, I was a mom of two. And at that point, I had my first dilation. And he said that they were only able to dilate me about 0.5 millimeter because it tore all the way down. And so he said, any farther and I risk rupturing my esophagus, which for those people that don't know, that's life-threatening. That is open chest, life-threatening surgery. So he said what he thinks that I should do is have what's called a serial dilations. So where I go in every 3 weeks, go under anesthesia and have a dilation every 3 weeks to prevent the scar tissue from completely forming again and just keep opening and opening and opening. So that was the only way that he knew how to treat me. And that's what we did. So for about 6 months, I went in every 3 weeks for a serial dilation. It was excruciatingly painful every single time. And just like the first and the second one, I couldn't eat for about a week afterwards, anything besides smoothies and mashed potatoes and applesauce because it was too painful. So I did that for about 6 months while my husband was finishing up his 4th year of med school. And my doctor at the time had done some research, and he found a doctor in North Carolina, and he knew that we were applying for residencies at that point, so we could kind of go anywhere. And he said, look, I found a doctor at Duke, which is a research hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he is an esophageal specialist. So all he does is EOE. So he thought that that's where I should go. So he sent the referral because the wait list was over a year long. And we were about a year from moving. So he said, if I send this now, by the time that you move, you can be not too far out from getting an appointment with him, which is what we did. And we applied to residencies in North Carolina, which we got. And so I saw him a year later. So, and I continued to have serial dilations. So almost for a full year at that point, I was going in every 3 weeks. So, and then came the move time, and I came to Raleigh and saw the doctor there, and he of course wanted to do a scope to get in there, and he looked at my past history and said, man, this is rough. So he went in there, and when I first got to talk to him, he said, this is the hardest case I've ever seen.
Oh my goodness.
So, and that was scary, because going from the doctor who was scared to touch me and scared that, and told me that, I'm going to do the best that I can to make it to where you can survive and swallow and eat without going to the emergency room every day. Then to the specialist who this is all he sees, all he does in one of the top hospitals in the United States, going, I've never seen anybody like you. Yeah.
And how did that make you feel? I mean, that's kind of a dumb question, but I think it's important to know, like, how did you feel in that moment?
Scared. I was going through all of this. It was scary because it's still like, there's no cure. And at that point, when I had seen my first doctor in Colorado, and really started this process, there was no medications. The only way that they treated me was with PPIs and acid reflux, just to prevent that scar tissue from forming even more. And of course, I underwent allergy testing, and that didn't give me any answers. So, and I know we'll touch on it later as far as dieting and stuff goes, so I'll leave that for later. But seeing that doctor there and him telling me that he'd never seen anybody like me, and that he had to wait and kind of go through my past medical history and my past scopes and look at the pictures and look at the biopsies. But when I first saw him, he was able to get that deep enough biopsy, and he did officially diagnose me. So that was in 2020. So a full year later, after the emergency room visit, 2020, I saw the specialist, and I was officially diagnosed with EOE.
Wow. And I think it's important to point out that, having a doctor that is very honest and direct with you about what their comfortability with doing, I mean, that's pretty, it's not what you want to hear, but it is what you want to hear, right? And and to refer you to someone who that's all they do. So I think that's a really great example of, the patient journey. It may not have been the quickest path to a diagnosis, but I think it shows what can happen, especially when you have an extreme case. And the doctor just didn't do something to do it. He was very thoughtful about it, and then referred you on to someone that was even better than he in terms of the experience level with that particular condition. So now you're in North Carolina. You have the biopsy. You're diagnosed. I think it might be still early before we see all these treatments come down the pipe, but was there any, how did this gastroenterologist at Duke manage your condition? Was there any dietary intervention? Did you talk about that? Were there any treatment options that he was presenting at that time to you?
Yeah. So, he told me to keep on the PPIs, but he actually doubled my dose on omeprazole. So I doubled that from 20 to 40. And he said immediately right away on the first appointment when he diagnosed me, he said, look, I'm spearheading some clinical trials of this. So he's doing a lot of research and testing patients with EOE on a placebo and a controlled drug. So at that point, it was a double blind study. Sorry. So I was all in. So I started the double blind in 2020, which was also the height of COVID. So that was
Oh,
rough I was traveling 2.5 hours from where I lived to Duke. And that was 2 or 3 times a month. And I would have monthly infusions. So, and I didn't know whether I was getting the medication or not. And I still actually don't know. They said it takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years post trial to find out if you got the actual drug. So I did that for almost a year, or if not a year. I did that for about a year, a clinical trial. So traveling 2.5 hours every week, I think, getting an infusion, and then I'd have to go back for blood draws and scopes and all the things. And that went well, but it was rough. It was hard to do, especially as a mom. But it kind of, my symptoms got better. And at that point, so during the trial, they cannot do any dilations. That's kind of, unless you need like an emergency dilation, because they want to really test and see how it's working.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, and at the very end of the trial, I did need a dilation. I got to the point where I was symptomatic again and I was having trouble swallowing and stuff was getting stuck. So he went in and dilated me, and I was still less than 10 millimeters as far as my esophagus size went. And he said it's still not where he wanted. He eventually wanted me to be at 20, which is normal. But he said, I'm not going to lie. Will it ever happen? I don't know. But that was the goal.
So when you were doing the scopes, which are part of maintenance and surveillance for every EOE patients, did they show any difference in your eosinophil count? Did it show any remission at all or any change in the right direction?
They were still, as they explained to me, off the charts throughout the entire trial. And from that very first biopsy diagnosis with him to all through the trial, it was still crazy eosinophils.
Now, did you try any of the, for EOE, there's dietary interventions, there's an elimination diet of certain foods. Was that offered to you? Did you try any of that at that point?
He did talk to me about that, and I underwent another allergy testing because he said that there was a few things in my previous allergy testing that they didn't test. And so I did that whole back prick all over again, which is also miserable. If for anybody who's been through it, they know. And that proved it showed up just allergies across the chart, to where he came back and counseled me and said, look, because it was so inflamed for everything and all the things that, including animals and, all the stuff. He said that he didn't really think that dietary would be beneficial to me. He said if I wanted to, I could try it. But at that point, I wasn't very open to a dietary trial. It's just kind of not really for me. And it's weird because over the time, from 2020 in the clinical trial and being counseled on dietary things that inflame the EOE or cause a flare up, I have kind of started to pay attention more, which I don't know if it's always been this way. And it's something that I'm still trying to figure out if, so whey bothers me now, and nuts. And so I don't know, because I used to drink milk every day, all day. I loved milk. And now I don't drink regular milk. I drink lactose-free milk because it doesn't bother me. So, and that's one thing that I still don't quite know if it's always been a flare up for me. And maybe that's why I was having so much scar tissue build up, because I just didn't know what was normal and what was not normal. Because now that I've, which we'll cover soon, is that I've officially reached a level of normalcy. So, and I'm wondering if that's why I can tell the different triggers for me.
Oh no, this is positive. I'm glad we're swinging in a positive, because I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is a very extreme case.
Yes.
So now you're going through the trial. Did the trial end? And we're, I think now over the last 4 years, there's been new treatments that come on the horizon. And what happened next? Are you still, were you in the trial? did the doctor offer you another treatment when things were approved? Like what's the next step here?
Yeah. So after the trial ended for the double blind, they offered me to go into open label study, which is where I get the actual drug 100% and I go into that treatment. But at that point in time, my husband and I had decided that we wanted to expand our family one more and that we wanted to try for another baby. So, and the timing was right. And so I decided to forego the open label study and instead focus on building my family because I was at a pretty okay point as far as symptoms went. And I was being managed with every 6 month scopes and dilations. So I felt okay to stop the study because I didn't think I had it in me to do a whole nother year, honestly.
And you had a baby. You went through a safe pregnancy and all that.
So, between that and that, I had to actually see a different doctor at UNC to have some endometriosis removed, which I'm still wondering if there's a connection between all of the inflammation in my body. And so, yeah, I do deal with endometriosis as well. And so I had that surgery done. And then after that surgery, I was able to get pregnant with my daughter. And for me, as far as symptom wise, I am pretty unsymptomatic during pregnancy, which was a nice relief. I've heard that sometimes it can go either way. So I had a very unsymptomatic pregnancy as far as EOE goes. Everything went well, and now she's 3. And so during that time, I did not see my doctor at Duke because I was so busy with being pregnant and raising 2 other kids. And I actually got unestablished with him because I wasn't aware that if you don't see a doctor within 3 years, you have to start all over. So that I had to go through that. And I started having symptoms again last year. And so he got me in immediately as soon as I got reestablished. And he said, let's get a scope, let's get dilated. So I did that. And he said, okay, there's actually treatment now. He presented me and said, there's 2 options. You have what's called Dupixent, which is a shot. And immediately, as soon as he said shot, I was out. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And then he said, okay, well, the other option is this thing called Eohilia. And it is a steroid that you swallow, and I would take it twice a day. And we'd go from there. And he said that he's had really good experience with patients on both treatments. And so he really presented all of the side effects and everything for both of those drugs. And he left it up to me, which I really appreciated. And even though I pretty much knew my answer from the very beginning, is I was going to go the less invasive route first. So that's what I did. I started Eohilia in November of 2021. And then he said, let's do this. And 12 weeks later, we'll go back in for another scope. So I did Eohilia for 12 weeks. He went in and took biopsies, and it came back as I'm in remission.
That's amazing.
So
you went through so much, and to hear that, I mean,
yeah.
There are no words, right? It's like, wow.
Yeah, so it makes me emotional because I am so grateful for modern medicine, and I'm so grateful for my doctor who listened and presented me with all of my options. But the fact that I have options now was huge. And so he was able to, because I was in remission and the inflammation was down, there was no eosinophils present, none, 0. And he dilated me to a 19 when I started at 3. Can you believe that?
No, I mean, this is just amazing, but it just makes me think of all the people that may be listening to this that had similar journeys such as you, that were just dealing with this their whole life, and struggling and not even knowing what's going on and coping with this, and to be able to finally have a treatment.
Yeah.
Or treatment options, because we've had a lot of patients that have done very well on Dupixent as well. We've heard stories of them, and Eohilia is the other option. And it's amazing and they work in different ways, but to have those options as patients. Yeah. How does that make you feel?
I am grateful. It's still scary every single day, but I actually brought it with me. But this little package right here has saved my life twice a day.
And what do? Swallow it?
Yeah, so it's a liquid and it tastes like cherry, which is refreshing because I'm used to chewing on chalky pills. So I'm very grateful that they went through and made sure that it didn't taste like garbage.
Wow. And how are you doing now?
I
How are you
am
doing?
still in remission. I have been taking it twice a day for the past 3 years now. So, which is it was nerve wracking in the beginning because I am a kind of person, especially with my husband. My husband's a physician, so between him and I, we do a lot of research as far as um, if I'm starting a new medication and kind of making sure that it's right for me and side effects. And I like to do my own research. So, and I know that being on a daily steroid has its downfalls, especially being on it long term. But the way that my doctor has explained it to me is that it's working right now, and the alternative it is going backwards. So at this point, that's what we've chosen, and we will kind of just cross that bridge when we get there. But right now, I'm just hoping and praying that it continues to work. He said that as far as scopes go, I only need to be scoped every 2 years, as long as I'm symptomatic or unsymptomatic. Sorry. So, which is huge news. I have never gone 2 years without a scope, and so just that news alone is huge. So it's been exciting. I mean, I still face the daily I still chew my food, I still bite my pills in half, because at this point it's not worth the risk to me. Even if I technically can swallow, physiologically, I, would probably be able to swallow that small allergy pill, but I still don't, because that's just me.
Well, you've been conditioned your whole life to do that. So it's almost like part of your routine that you just do it naturally. But what has remission been like for you? Are you able to eat whatever you want? Are you able to enjoy a meal with your family?
Yeah, so I do have a lot more freedom as far as that goes. And I feel like I don't have to focus so much on it. It is always still in the back of my mind because choking is scary and choking is real. And I don't ever want to experience that again. So I still make sure that I chew my food well and I pay attention when I'm eating. But I haven't had another experience like that ever since then, and it's been great. I still do avoid whey and I avoid nuts because even on this medication, I did try one time and I discovered that it still gives me symptoms. So I still avoid those things. And it's been great. I feel a very sense of normalcy, which I haven't felt ever in my entire life. So it's weird to still being, 3 years in remission and just trying to enjoy life and enjoy going out to restaurants and eating with my family and sometimes not being the last person at the dinner table.
That's awesome. Now, you mentioned you have to go for scopes every 2 years. I want to bring this to light because it's so important because the scoping, the surveillance. Now, sometimes you may feel no symptoms. Why is when you discuss with your doctor, why are the scopes so important in surveillance when you have EOE?
So, yeah, it's especially important when you're on treatment now because they want to make sure that the treatment is still working. And if I'm not doing those scopes, then they could miss it early on. And the way he explained it to me is that, oh, if you're feeling good, like, you're feeling good on an antibiotic and you stop taking it, but then you rebound and it can come back even worse and it can, build up the scar tissue faster than what I realize. And then it could kick us back quite a few steps down the road. So,
yeah. And to clarify, the scope is the only way they can really get a sample of the tissue to look at what's really happening. So it's not just how you feel. Oh yeah, I'm able to eat this and that. They really need to look at that tissue, correct?
yes. Yeah. Cause a lot of times, I mean, you feel symptomatic. So you think everything's great. But, I had experiences like that where when I was pregnant, I felt great and I thought I was fine. And I was actually building up scar tissue and I didn't even know.
Wow. Well, I could talk to you all day because this is so fascinating. I feel like we've done this journey. We've gone through the whole journey with you and it's incredible and heartbreaking and amazing all at the same time. What would you want someone who's listening, who may recognize these symptoms, whether it's in themselves, in a loved one, what would you like them to know?
That first of all, it is not all in your head. And it is important that you see a doctor, and a doctor that will advocate for you, that will be honest to you, and will present you with all of your options and not just push you into a specific thing to do. That is really, really huge as a patient. And from my experience, has made all of the difference in having a provider that really listens to you and doesn't push off any of your symptoms. So, and for loved ones, also not essentially poking fun at the person being the last one in the dinner table, and maybe mention like, hey, I listened to this podcast, or I heard this thing on, because the internet is great for these kind of things. We get to have all this knowledge that we didn't have before. And if I would have had this knowledge, or my mom would have heard something like this, my story could have been completely different. So I just hope that because it's so well known and there's treatments and people are talking about it and people are advocating for it, that nobody has to go through what I went through. And that even if you, like the patient or the person experiencing it, doesn't recognize it, that a loved one will, and say, hey, I think maybe you might be dealing with something called EOE, and maybe you should bring it up to your doctor. And who knows, that could completely change their outcome and how long they have to deal with this, or even save their life. I mean, you just never know.
Well, Samantha, thank you so much for your candid, honest, and courageous discussion today, and for sharing your journey. I know from what you've told us, it hasn't been easy, but you are such an example of empowerment and advocacy for yourself and for others. And we're really grateful to have you on the show today.
I've enjoyed becoming now a patient advocate, as you would. I have attended some conferences, and through AppFed, I have found a lot of resources that have been helpful, and podcasts like this one have been so huge. So I encourage you guys to just get answers if you're questioning, and get some help.
Yeah. And if you have trouble swallowing, or know someone who does have trouble swallowing, or food getting stuck, or have quietly adjusted how you eat just to cope, you're not alone. Please know that, listeners. And recognition is the first step. And EOE is manageable with the right care. So be sure to follow along, like, subscribe, and share this episode with those who may benefit from some EOE awareness. We have great resources, including AppFed, apfed.org, has some great resources for patients and caregivers as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, and caregivers, and they have a doctor finding tool as well. They're a great resource for anybody with EOE or thinking it about it.
And there are treatment options out there, from dietary interventions to medical therapies that you have to choose from. So know you're not alone, and there are options for treatment. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Gastro Girl Podcast. For more information and resources, please visit gastrogirl.com. Do you have a question for Gastro Girl? Please email podcast@gastrogirl.com. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in the Gastro Girl Podcast are not a substitute for medical advice from your healthcare professional. Please consult a licensed clinician in your state regarding all matters related to your health.